What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe.
And Amy.
Review. It's our weekly show where we review the magic stories as they're posted on Wizards' website. And we are still in Dominaria, loving it. And we are here for...
We'll be there a while.
Yes, that's true. We are here to review Return to Dominaria, Episode 3, as always, by Martha Wells.
Yay!
Our quick review at the beginning, or my quick review at the beginning... This is the payoff. This is the payoff one for all of the people who knew about Dominaria's past and wanted to see what it looked like in the present. There were a lot of name drops. There was the reintroduction of JaAR as we saw her in the first story, in that little brief glimpse, and the Weatherlight as well, but also some legacy people, if you will. And that's all I'll say before the full review itself, but I think for that reason alone, and if you needed more than that, for that reason alone, I'd say that this is definitely worth your time. This is, like I said, this is the payoff, right? The last two were mostly, if not entirely, Gideon and Liliana, which is, you know, especially for people who are not big Gatewatch fans, no Gatewatch to be seen in this one. Asterisk, read the story, but no real Gatewatch presence to be seen in this one. All new characters and JaAR and the Weatherlight. So I highly recommend it. I enjoyed it greatly, and I think it's definitely worth your time.
It's worth your time. I think it's important to kind of see how the Weatherlight is going to be assembled.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of.
Mm-hmm.
So that you're not missing that piece.
Oh, yeah. So that's the quick review in the beginning. As we always say, we review, we don't summarize. So if you have not had the opportunity to go read the story,
please go do it now.
We highly recommend it. Go do that, and then come back here. Share your opinions with us, hear ours, see how they differ or are similar to yours, and join in on the discussion.
Yes,
so,
in the comments.
As always. So on to the full review itself. This was a really good one. We got to see, it's cool. This was the nostalgia story. This was the story where you got to hear about people who aren't really around anymore. So, you know, JaAR is trying to get a crew for the Weatherlight together. She can't get Sarah. She can't get Gerard. She can't get Captain Sisay. But she gets some stand-ins for those people, which, I mean, you know, for JaAR, I'm sure it's nostalgic, but it's also for our nostalgia as well. And so we meet all of these individual characters this time, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about each and every one of them. I'm looking forward to the characterization, because we got some for people like Shauna Sisay, for example. We saw a good amount of her in comparison to some of the others. We saw a good amount of Tiana as well, the angel. But not so much from characters like Arvad or Raph, right? We saw a little bit from Raph, but I'm assuming there will be plenty more. And opportunities for each of them to shine in their own way. That's just my own individual understanding and concept of what I want to see from characterization and character development. What were your thoughts on the characters being displayed, etc.?
I kind of hated that part.
Okay.
I wish they had described the actual importance of having descendants as the new crew.
Okay.
As someone who would rather distance themselves from quite a few of their relatives, I really need some explanation as to why it matters to have them specifically, because otherwise, you know, what does it matter? You know, I hope for my own, you know, personal preference, basically, that people don't look at me and see my parents or my grandparents or expect me to be the same as them, because I very much do not want to be.
It's a really, really interesting perspective. I like that. I like that because it's not in any way something I ever would have thought of myself. To me, it just made perfect sense where it's like, yeah, of course JaAR is going to say that she wants a Sisay on her ship, which, by the way, the only thing I ever heard about Captain Sisay was that her name was Captain Sisay. So why did I ever... I always just assumed that was her first name. Sisay, we've now learned, is her last name. That was not a thing that I was aware of. But anyway, so yeah, to me it just made sense. Like, oh, a Capuchin and a Sisay, get them on board. That's great. So that's a
Why?
Do
they have any skills that make them particularly useful on an airship? They didn't talk about that at all.
Well,
all she basically said was like, "Oh, well, I just thought it'd be cool." And it's like, okay, well, how about one, actually check if they want to, which she did, kind of. 2, actually check if they'd be helpful. And 3, I don't know, not assume that other people who are not related to these old dead people, actually might know what they're doing if they want to be aboard. You know what I'm saying? To
be fair, I don't want to mischaracterize. I do not believe it said anywhere in this story, nor am I trying to imply that I think that Tiana is related to Sarah. It's just an angel, and it happened to be the angel that showed up. And to kind of counter you, not that that was my intent on this, but Tiana was only asked by JaAR after she showed ingenuity and engineering prowess with regard to the Weatherlight. So at least with her, at least with Tiana, there was a reason at the outset.
Right.
Plus, she's an angel, so I'm sure there's plenty that comes with that territory as well. Shauna had her own abilities, but it seemed that, I'll agree with you in that it seemed that JaAR was seeking her out solely for her name, although when we see her, we see that she does have abilities and skills, not just with her lack of being affected by magic, right? Even Raph's illusions didn't affect her, which I find very interesting.
That's very cool.
Because magic, like hitting you and kind of not taking effect, is one thing, but an outward effect like an illusion is something totally different. And so the fact that she seems to be either immune or resistant to magic in seemingly all forms. Obviously, we only saw 2 forms attempt to affect her, but that's incredible power, in my opinion. And as a player, I am super curious to see what abilities that affords her as a magic card. Very, very interested to see how that flavor comes out in the cards, because as of the date of this recording, as far as I know, and I'm pretty sure I would have seen it, we have not seen that card spoiled yet, if there even is one. So I'm interested. I'm very interested to see what, if anything, or how that is depicted, because that would be really cool.
I would definitely be interested to see that too, because although I don't play really, one of my favorite things about Magic is seeing how the flavor really becomes depicted in art and stories.
Yes.
And I would like to see that card and see, in a more blatant way what it is she can actually do.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, obviously the thinking about it, the obvious answer would be like hexproof, because can't be targeted by your opponent's spells or abilities, but you could target her with your own, like, putting armor on her or something like that. So I don't know, that seems like it would be something. I feel like it would need a little bit more than that, in my opinion. And to be fair, she very well may have been spoiled in the leak. I did not very heavily read the leak because I wasn't fully interested in doing that. I'd rather see the whole card spoiled in its true form. So maybe you already know that. And if you do, that's great. I'd rather you not tell me in the comments down below. But, whatever. We will see the card one way or another sooner or later. So that's totally fine. And then we got to see Raph. Because Raph, it was an interesting change, right? When JaAR went to Shauna, and I keep looking at my notes because there's like a million names and I don't want to get any of them wrong, but when JaAR went to Shauna, Shauna seemed interested to join up right then and there, which is great.
Yeah.
And then she...
Also, I feel like we needed a bit more explanation. Like...
Fair.
Why was she so gung-ho?
Right. Well, and maybe we'll see.
Right.
Right? With all of these things. I mean, this is episode 3 of 11 or 12. I think it's 12 still, but 11 or 12. And so we still have many more weeks to go, so we shall see. Yeah. But Raph ended up on this expedition because his sister... Danitha said no.
Right.
Now, Danitha is mentioned as distantly related to Gerard, whereas Shauna seemed to be a direct descendant.
Yeah.
Danitha was more distantly related, and with Raph being her brother, it tracks that is remains to be true for Raph as well, is that he's also distantly related to Gerard, but still, they are Capuchins. So that's a thing. That was cool. But, you know, Raph was the only one to seemingly kind of put his own hat into the ring to be a member of the crew, as opposed to Joyra handpicking them and or Tiana handpicking them, as we saw with Arvad, who we've learned basically nothing about except that he's a vampire, but in Benalia warrior armor, and we'll have to see what kind of character he is in the weeks to come.
So far, all we know is he's kind of odd.
And let's metagame this for a second here, if we can. Let's not forget that in the Magic Story podcast, which we reviewed on our channel a couple weeks back, you can go check that out if you missed it, but shameless plugs, why not? But Martha Wells herself mentioned that of the new characters that are new to this story, not older characters like Teferi, Joyra, Karn, etc., she mentioned when asked by Doug Beyer that she most enjoyed writing for Tiana and Arvad. So while we've seen a fair amount, right, not anything crazy, but I enjoyed the interactions that Tiana had, the kind of shy, introverted angel who has a lot of skills but doesn't really want to play them up, and has love for and nostalgia for the Weatherlight in its own right. Possibly, it seemed to be because it was the Weatherlight, although I would have suspected that it would have been because of the history of the Power Stone being the condensed version of Sarah's realm, Sarah being the super powerful old angel, but she didn't seem to know much about the Power Stone, but did care about the Weatherlight, and again, that could go to her engineering prowess and etc. So
we'll kind of see where that takes us.
Right, but I appreciated knowing going in that Arvad, who was kind of added on at the end, again, I'm sure because there's more to come from him, but I was glad to know going in that Tiana and Arvad seem to be important to the author, because that means that we can look forward to hearing a lot more from them. Yeah. And we don't have to worry about, because this is something that bothers me, right? I wrote down Artificer Hadi and Chief Metalworker Tien. Who the hell knows if they'll ever show up again? I don't know if that was one-off instances of them existing, and the only reason that they were there was to show that even they were impressed by Tiana's engineering prowess and interest in the Weatherlight and its inner workings. But with Tiana and Arvad, I know we're seeing them more, and so I don't feel bad about wanting to know more, getting invested, because I'm not afraid of not having a payoff. Whereas with
and you shouldn't be afraid to do that.
Right. But whereas with people like Hadi and Tien, I'm not crazy like, oh, I can't wait to see them again. If we never see them again, that's fine. I've kind of resigned myself to that fact, because they seem to be secondary, tertiary characters that are not necessarily going to be very important. And I'm willing to be stood corrected. That's fine as well, as always, right? If they show up, I'm not going to be like, this is stupid. No, obviously not. If we see them again, that's great. Right, I know their names now, I know their professions, but That was kind of about as much as we were given in this one. Although to be fair, we were given less about Arvad, so or about the same. So we'll see where that goes in the weeks to come. And then, Amy,
yes.
What could have possibly been my favorite part of this entire story?
Are we to that already?
Yeah. I think so. We've gotten everything else. The only other thing is with Raph, for example. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about Raph, but unless you had other things to talk about other people, please go right ahead. I'm sorry. I don't want to. I feel bad about cutting you off.
No, I mean, I don't think so.
I'm curious.
I think it's very preliminary.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
We've got
yes,
the
yes.
first few seconds of each of these characters,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's so much more to learn about all of them that it's kind of hard to draw any conclusions at this point.
Right.
Because we don't have enough details.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited to find out.
Oh, agreed. Well, and you know what, to bounce off of that a little bit, speaking of only short introductions to characters, I'm curious, because at this point, it seems like the Weatherlight story is going to continue in the weeks to come, and the Planeswalkers story, the Gatewatches story, is going to continue in the weeks to come. What I want to know is, what part, if any, does Danitha play now? They introduced her to us.
She has a card.
Well, she has art. Oh, no, you're right. We've seen her card.
card.
Silly me. Thank you. Yes, we've seen her card. She exists as a card, as a legendary creature. But this story had her saying, no, I'm not coming with you. If I'm going to fight from here, my home, defending my home, which Martha, or whatever, made she and the creative team made a big point of saying that Danitha had every right to say that.
Of course.
She had every right to say, this is my home, I will fight, but it will be in the defense of my home,
right.
Not hundreds of miles away flying
right.
in an airship.
You just showed up here saying you wanted me with no real explanation as to why.
Right.
And you wanted me to be distracted from the thing that's important to me to go do something else.
Yeah.
It's absurd for me to say yes to this. I completely understand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so but still, that means all the more that I am interested in seeing where that goes. Mm-hmm. I want to know if we see Danitha again, why we might see Danitha again, and if we'll see her with anyone else besides just herself, right? Because now we know that there are two Capuchin descendants, at least, that, we have now been named with. We saw that Raph, we got a little bit more information on than I think I originally was aware of, because Raph was willing to lie to beef up people's opinions of him, and to get onto this crew. He was willing to, again, arguably attack, right? I mean, the illusion wasn't an attack, but at the same time, he made JaAR at least think or feel like visually that she was flying in the air. Now, we know, and hopefully you do as well, but we know what kind of experiences JaAR has had in her life. And so experiencing an illusion is nothing new
it's not
for
a big
JaAR.
deal. She's
pretty close friends with Teferi, let's be real. So illusions are not a big thing for JaAR, but Raph didn't seem to know that. He mentioned, Danitha told me that you were that JaAR, but I didn't believe it or whatever. So, so he used an illusion on somebody after having lied to them and being caught in that lie.
Yeah.
So makes perfect sense. He's a teenager.
Right.
So it makes sense that he would be reckless. That's written very well. And I'm interested to see where that takes us with Raph. If they're in a fight type situation, it may come down to the concerns that Shauna and JaAR had with him in the first place, which is he's young. There's danger that we're coming up against. And sure, he might be powerful, but now we've seen him characterized as reckless. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that, if anything, because I would be surprised if we didn't see that come into play more because of the fact that that seems to be his character, because for the brief glimpse that we were given of him, that's what we got.
Right.
So.
And, yeah, so I have a couple of theories as to how we'll see Danica.
Danitha.
Danitha.
I messed up and said Danica a lot earlier. It's Danitha.
Okay. I was like, why did that come?
Yeah.
But it's close enough to Danitha,
Yes.
so. Alright. But anyway, Danitha, like, I have a couple of theories as to why she would come around at that point, you know?
Okay.
One, Raph is in danger and she somehow knows it, and so she has to come and save the day.
Mm-hmm.
Or two, Raph and or someone else convinces her it's a good idea. Or three, basically the entire world's just going to end if she doesn't. So
See, and I was going to say it's somewhat similar to your third, but not exactly. I'll throw in a fourth. I would think to get her involved, you may have to do something to her home. So sure, that may be in as part of the whole world, but if the Cabal or some other similar organization comes in and maybe just attacks her home, she may have to make a tough decision in terms of, do I stay and fight and possibly die, or do I retreat and go join up with this Weatherlight crew and finally say, fine, you've got me, they need to pay, and join up with a group of people who are powerful enough to help her.
Or maybe just the opposite. Maybe they stop fighting her home and they're just now focused on the Weatherlight and the people in it.
And she wants revenge
sees a need
or something. Yeah.
to, run to their aid.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different theories that we could come up with for that.
Yeah.
If you've got another one, leave it in the comments.
As always, as I said earlier, before we get to my favorite part of the story, because Amy's right, that is kind of the end cap here. The other thing that I wrote down is there were a lot of early name drops at the beginning of this story, and none of them paid off in this story, which is fine, but I was curious because in the past, I feel like, and I want to call out my bias if I see it, in the past I feel like I would have said that this was a bad idea to throw out these name drops like this. Here I don't feel like it's as big of a deal, because we got the name drops of Karn, Venser, Teferi, and Joda. Now to be fair, Karn and Venser's names were just literally just thrown out there of, I miss Karn and Venser, JaAR being the speaker or thinker at that point. Whereas she thought harder, or at least gave a little bit more of a description for Teferi and for Joda in terms of trying to get people to crew this version or this resurrected Weatherlight. And yet nothing really came of that in this one.
Right.
I have no doubt that more will come of that in the future, but still there was no payoff this time.
Right.
And for me, this time, I was okay with that. Whereas in the past, I don't think I would have been as okay with that.
Yeah.
Because this is a nostalgic set. This is a return to a historical plane. And I think that because these are names that I recognize, my bias blended in, and I said to myself, no, that's cool, the fact that they name dropped. And in trying to think about it more critically, the only thing I could think of was that is your opportunity. If you're a new reader, if you're unaware of these characters, that's your opportunity to go look them up. You've been given their names. You now know that they matter, right? And to be fair, this story gave you a lot of them.
Yeah.
Sarah, Venser, Karn, Teferi, Joda, Gerard, Captain Sisse. Like, that's a lot of names.
Yes, it is.
And even more so, that's a lot of information if you want to go look up information on all these people, particularly people like the four mentioned at the beginning of Teferi, Karn, Venser, Joda. Like, those are big names in Magic's past you could look up cards of 3 out of 4 of those people. And technically now 4 out of 4 if you don't care about full spoilers. But the idea of all of these people now having been officially named in the story, I feel like that was Martha and the creative team saying, they're coming.
Right.
If you want...
Like, I know you've been holding your breath, but just a little longer.
Well, and not only that, yes, but I was even going to say for new readers, if you're new, these names are a thing, and you should go look them up.
Kind of important, guys, just letting you know.
Right. Asterisk, like stars, big stars, and flashing lights. Look up these people. And that's a lot of research that would need to be done if you want an in-depth knowledge of them.
Super detailed past on all of these people.
Right. If you want brief, there are many Vorthos out there that would be able to help you out with that. Speaking of Vorthos, and it's funny, I didn't do this on purpose, but speaking of other Vorthos in the community, we have called out in a positive manner Vorthos J in the past. He was one of the people who interviewed Martha when we first learned about her, and in the story, they mentioned, I don't remember who said it. I think it might have been Tiana. I really don't recall. I'm sorry I didn't write it down, but somebody mentioned that the Weatherlight looked just like Gerard's blade from all of the depictions.
I think that was Tiana.
I think so too. But that Tiana mentioned that the Weatherlight was the tip of Gerard's spear in all of the depictions of Gerard. And thankfully, before this story went up, either a day or two before, we had spoiled the saga of Gerard and the vertical image of Gerard. And I wanted to call out Vorthos J and say thank you to him because he was able to describe the fact that the spear was tipped to look like the Weatherlight.
Right.
And the staff was the beam of light coming from the null moon, which was the circular portion at the top of the staff, which was like half to 3/4 of the way cut off by the art. So the fact that he was able to notice that and then was able to show the depiction of the art from the original Legacy Weapon card that depicted that instance occurring in the first place in attempting to destroy Yawgmoth in Urborg, that's so awesome. And the fact that then you had members of Wizards contacting him or responding to him on Twitter, of course, which is what I'm referring to say, oh man, I'm really glad somebody was able to figure that out. And to be fair, if he hadn't, we would have only had to wait a couple of days and we would have at least found out that portion of it, and then you could have extrapolated more, but he was able to...
I feel like without that, I wouldn't have understood the line in the story.
Okay, that's fair. That's totally fair.
I would have just kind of, gone past it and not realized that it was a thing.
Right, and maybe even hoped, maybe we'll understand it in the future.
That's kind of like a weird part that I don't need to remember.
No, that's totally fair. And yet, it's such an awesome story. Mm-hmm. Like, it's such an awesome flavor point of the fact that, because again, like we said, I believe that, I'm relatively certain that was Tiana, and the fact that was something that got her emotional, because that's the history of the plane that she's on. So that was really, really cool. I liked that a lot. That is all I had. So now I will say, Amy, I'll try this again. Okay. What do you think my favorite part of this whole story was?
Johnny.
So like I said, arguably there was no Gatewatch in this story, but technically there was. Because Johnny is a member of the Gatewatch.
Because he showed up looking pretty. That's all he did.
He did look pretty. But...
Okay.
I love me some Johnny. If you're new to
why don't you marry him?
I would love to. No, I wouldn't. If you're new to the show, Johnny is my favorite personally my favorite planeswalker. Amy's got Nissa, I've got a Johnny. It's just a thing.
But Nissa's better though. Wow.
We got to see her first, but she broke her oath, whereas a Johnny didn't.
Yeah, because she's baller.
So anyway, it seems like we have, I assume now, the entire crew, although to be fair, again, looking ahead/backwards, you'll understand it in a second, looking ahead/backwards, We also know that JaAR and Gideon were on the Weatherlight when Jace showed up, which again is forward in time because Jace hasn't shown up yet, but it's backward in time because we read it in the past. So anyway, so who knows?
I could do it.
Yeah. So who knows?
Because I had already done it.
So who knows if JaAR continues to recruit or if JaAR and Gideon, etc., just happened to show up along the way. And it'll be interesting to see if when Jace showed up, were Liliana and Ajani just like up on deck somewhere and not when Jace showed up, or are they somewhere else because they weren't there when Jace showed up? We'll have to see.
They're in the other room.
That's weird.
Alone.
No, that's weird.
Yeah.
That's real weird. Anyway, so yes, I'm super happy that Ajani is here. There were a lot of discussions as to whether he would actually be here because the last we heard of Ajani, he was supposed to have met everyone on Dominaria, but Dominaria, I mess up the pronunciation all the time and I'm very sorry. I'm trying to work on it, I promise.
Somebody leave it in the comments.
It's in the trailer. I've been watching the trailer. Karn says it many times now. I'm trying to internalize that and kick out all the bad ways of saying it.
Okay, so it's like long vowels? Is that what it is?
I think it's like Dominaria, I believe. Anyway.
Dominaria.
Right.
Or Dominaria.
Dominaria.
Okay.
Again, that's what I think it is. I'll go back and watch the trailer again.
For the 20th time.
Exactly, which is fine. It was a great trailer.
If it helps you learn it, I guess.
But I'm glad now to see that Ajani is there. I think that personally, I didn't see a lot of people talking about it today online, but as far as I know, this was the first instance that we heard of Ajani finally being here because I don't know that he has a card or anything.
Like, what he's done in the interim, because he left.
Well, he was going to go tie up some loose ends. He said that, and then he was going to come back.
Where was he going?
I don't remember. It's the information's out there. We knew it at the time that we read the story. I don't remember now. That was way back in Ether Revolt. So
I know.
And we've reviewed many stories since then. And speaking of us being busy, before you guys tune out at the end of this episode, I wanted to give a huge shout out because we had a really busy week. Last week we had our regular Thursday episode, a bonus Friday episode, and then on Sunday, it wasn't fully finalized yet, so we didn't announce it then, but I can announce it now. At the end of this video, when the videos pop up and the subscribe button and everything, there's going to be a video popping up that isn't from our channel. Right. But I want to give a huge shout out and a thank you to Behind the Counter from Insane Games. They featured Amy and myself on their podcast.
Yes.
This past Sunday that aired live on their Twitch, their YouTube, their Facebook, etc. But they also had the VOD, the video on demand, on their YouTube Monday afternoon or Monday morning. And so we're on there and we talk a little bit of Magic. They talk, before we got on, a little bit about video games, current video games. And we, along with the crew of Behind the Counter, spoke about some WWE because WrestleMania is coming up, etc. Right. So if any of that seems like it would interest you, we encourage you to go check it out if you know people, because we don't usually do that kind of content, although those are things that we are geeks for.
Right. Hence the name of the channel.
Holy crap, is that where it's from? It's hard to tell sometimes because we do so much Magic stuff. We're hoping to branch out, but regardless,
we're trying to get out there and do more things.
And so once again, we wanted to send a huge thank you to them.
Yes.
It would help us out a lot. It would help them out a lot. If you are interested in those kinds of things, or if you know people who would be interested, click on the video, check it out, give it some time, and share it with your friends because it's a lot of fun. That group is hilarious. We
had a great time doing it.
Yes. And even the parts that we're not there for, if you're interested in video games, listen to what they have to say. There's a lot of salty people in that bunch, but it's a lot of fun. It's really worth your time. So
I think they brought up some interesting insights about the WWE stuff too.
Yes, agreed. As did I think we did. I guess that's a little arrogant to say, but I thought we did our research, we did our homework, which we try to do for this show also. But regardless, for that, like I said, I really encourage you to check that out. It'll probably be over here somewhere. And then the subscribe button will be here for us. If you want to go check us out as well and find out when all of our videos come out, usually when there aren't bonus episodes and us on other shows and stuff like that, we have these reviews every Thursday and we have Paper Magic product openings every Monday.
Yes.
So you can go check that out. Once Dominaria finally releases, we will have pre-release openings at midnight or after midnight. Once we get our kits, we can open them up and you'll see those as well. So if you can't make it out to a pre-release,
those videos tend to do pretty well compared to our other videos.
So hopefully you see it. Hopefully you're interested.
Hopefully you see it.
To be fair,
it'll be up very soon after the pre-release.
After midnight, yeah. So, but to be fair, hopefully you get out to a pre-release yourself if you can, because it's totally worth your time every time, in my opinion. So, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been another episode of JaAR here on Geek for All. Whether it is going to check out Behind the Counter, and I was going to say subscribe to them as well if you like their stuff, because they deserve it. They work really hard on their stuff and they have really good content.
And they have videos every week or every other week.
It's every week as long as
completely consistent.
Right, I mean barring holidays and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So definitely go check them out. Thank you for checking us out and continuing to join us as we show off our
#Vorthos Bride.
That's right. Every time here and on other programs.
Yeah.
So thank you guys so much once again. This has been another episode of JaAR here on Geek for All. I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, guys, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.